those of you who don't know me, my name is Jim Snyder. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation here in Framingham, and we're doing a number of great projects throughout the city. This is certainly one of them. There's been some build-up for a number of years. This is a project certainly that the mayor supports and would like to see some things done here. So we were able to get some money to kind of begin this design effort, and we're really thankful that you're here for one, and also really want to hear from you all your ideas. This is your time to kind of dream up what you want your park to be. So this is really the place. There's no silly ideas, you know, anything that you think that you might be incorporated. We'd love to hear those ideas, and then we'll work through how they either do or don't get integrated into the design at the end of the day. Hopefully at the end of the day, we have a design that the neighborhood is proud of and that we can all kind of rally around. This is going to be kind of a three-step process that we're going to go through with design. We're going to have a meeting today to kind of kick things off and kind of get the juices flowing and thinking about a new park. The next step will be we'll take that information and put it into a couple of designs that we'll present back and show people, get some more feedback. Again, we're always looking for feedback on these designs, and this is your time, the public, to chime in. And then the last one will be in front of the commission. We'll talk about a final design there. Hopefully we'll have some numbers at that point, so we'll have some ideas of what it may cost. And then we go off to City Council and the mayor and ask for funding for actual construction. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at for this process. Just wanted to throw out there too that there are two other projects that are happening at the same time, or while we design this, there is a couple of efforts that are going on. And fortunately, we have Allison Elliott here, who has been managing some of these projects, and she can give us a real-time update on where we are.
Before, just let me make a quick announcement in Portuguese. We have translation available. Nós temos a tradução disponível. Se alguém aqui fala português e precisa de ajuda, só fala comigo, tá bom? Muito obrigado.
So I'm Allison Elliott. You guys may recognize me. I was formerly the Stormwater Environmental Engineer in DPW. I am now the Deputy Director of Parks and Rec. So, thank you. So, you guys, if you've seen me before, you know that I've been working on the outfall project for Waushakum for 3 years now. So, I will continue to manage that project in this role. So, Jim and I talk a lot. I will also be working a lot on this phase of it. So, we're going to incorporate everything that we're doing with the outfall into this. The outfall project, we got all of our permitting done. We're very excited. We put it out to bid. We've selected the lowest bidder was Sunco. We're working to get their contract settled, and we're hoping to be in construction in the next few months. Hopefully early summer we'll be doing the work. So that's the outfall project, and we should wrap it up by the end of the summer. As far as the other project, that is being run through planning department, funded with the CPA funds for the dock. As far as I understand, it's pre-designed. We do not yet have a contract for design of that, and that needs to be worked out through their department. So we have constant communication with them in the planning department, and I'll give you updates as I can, but really if there's specific questions for that, we'll direct you that way.
And we are providing project updates on our page. It's a work in progress. We appreciate your patience on that, but we are trying to build that up and make it consistent across our project. So it'll have information like kind of where the funding came from, what the project is going to be like, as well as significant, you know, milestones that we might have, like this meeting. We'll put this information out there. An example you can look at is Reardon Park, where we have a lot of information there from the community meetings and things like that. So also, if you feel like you think of something after this meeting, please reach out to us. I think at some point we'll put the team up here, and most of you have my number or my email anyway. So please reach out and provide us that feedback. I really think it's kind of critical. And what else? I think, the last thing I should say, as part of this process, and it's still kind of unfolding, is we're gonna have to close a section of the beach during this construction period. Now, we haven't met with the construction company yet, they haven't been selected yet, all right, so.
We haven't had our kickoff with them.
The kickoff with them yet, and that's when we get into kind of the construction timeline, and we'll have more details about when they're coming in and what they'll need for space. The thought process for us is, we really don't want people crossing a work zone to get to the grass. On the other side, there's no real easy way to do that, plus there's gonna be bigger equipment and materials and other things kind of in that area. So we're gonna have to work with the contractor to see what the laydown and the construction area kind of ends up looking like, and then we still plan to have, you know, the picnic tables out there and the benches and some of the other things. We might have to reposition those a little bit, but we're gonna try to keep things as normal as possible while we kind of go through this phase of the construction. And then, you know, once we ultimately do the park design, the whole park will be closed for that duration of time when we're working on that part, but we'll keep you posted. So, are there any other questions, kind of an overview about this or anything else? Yes?
When do they expect, that the plans all get approved, when do they expect, like, start of this project, the groundbreaking?
So a lot of that is dependent on the funding. So it's the next step will be after this design, we have a pretty picture, we have some numbers, we can go sell it to basically city council and the mayor and say this is what we want to do. So once that money gets appropriated, which is usually on the fiscal year, and that will be on July 1, essentially. So it's not going to be probably this year because I don't think the design is going to be fully fleshed out at that point. So that'll be, we'll submit it in the summer and the fall for the fiscal year 26 budget. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. And yours is not alone. So Temple Street, the splash pad, Reardon Park, and this project are all kind of on that similar design path right now.
That makes sense.
Yeah, but we'll keep you posted, and when it's time, we'll let you know. Let's go to City Hall and let's go to the meeting and let's make our case and try and get our votes.
Yeah, so my thinking, it's not a huge rush anyway, because we've gotta get the water quality up to speed.
Mhm.
And hopefully, once we get a new, you know, beach house, it's gonna be, people are gonna come, right? You build it and they'll come.
Yeah, and we've been trying for years. That's been a priority for the mayor ever since he opened up
Right.
the beach, you know, for 12 months out of the year, as well as, you know, trying to get guards down there and things like that. So we're gonna continue to try to keep it as, you know, as vibrant as possible. But definitely, I think once we have a new park here and we kind of breathe some new life into this park, I think it's gonna be excellent.
Awesome.
One last thing, you know, we have some food over here. We know we took you to dinner time, so we have some snacks, little pizza, some apples, some chips, if you want to nibble on something. So.
Great.
Awesome. I'm just gonna introduce myself. I'm Scott Bishop from Bishop Land Design. We're the team lead. On my team in back here, marketing director Lori Hemingway is here tonight, and we also have a great team of architects with us here. You want to introduce yourself? Go, Chip.
I'm Rob Markolo. I'm with Kuzmineri Architects. I'm the East Coast Studio Director.
Hi everyone, I'm Liz Rainieri from Kuzmineri Architects. Very nice to see you.
So you guys probably know a lot more about this place than I do, and that's one of the things that we're trying to understand when we engage with you all is, you know, what are the things you want to do, but also what it means to everybody. We have done some historic research, and so that's one thing that helps us figure out what this is all about. I'm a landscape architect and a human ecologist, so part of like what I'm really interested in is what was this working like before, and how can we get it to kind of function ecologically as it had done in the past. Obviously, you can see we're kind of on the edge here of Framingham, but the geologic history of this place is really interesting. A lot of this was formed back when the glacier was just kind of sitting here, and then dammed up the water in back of what was called the historic Charles Lake, which is returned to the Charles River, right? Because the dam was basically released, and then all of these small glaciers and ponds were formed at kind of how this all came to be in terms of the geography. There are also other folks that were here before us, and we want to acknowledge that. The Nipmucks were here before, and Nipmuc means the freshwater fishing place. So there's a lot there that we can say is really embodied with Waushakum, within what was going on here. It's Waushakum means basically the eel fishing place. So we believe that to be the American eel, this little guy here. Maybe not that attractive, I guess kind of tasty though. So anyway, that's, so we know that, that was also part of the ecology, but we know that, those people respected the land and they basically knew how to use the land without overusing it. And so those are the kinds of things that we also think about when we think about park design and ecology. Obviously used recreationally for quite a long time since it's been settled. These are historic postcards of the area. This one is actually across from the beach, but some of these are actually closer to the beach. So what I noticed about these is actually how the vegetation is in relationship with the lake. And that's actually an ecological thing, and that was kind of helping out with the quality of the water that's in the lake. Like that's basically cleaning that water, and that's making sure that the things that go from the water to the land have a good relationship. So, we like the beach, and we're not suggesting that we get rid of the beach, but we want to think about ways that we can actually integrate vegetation in a different way and create something that's a little bit more than just grass, sand, and trees. So we want to give you guys some ground rules because there's stuff like what we call jurisdictional boundaries and fun things like that we have to be aware of and we have to respect for the most part, or work through those with a regulatory body. And so part of that is just understanding that, but also we've gone through, I walked through the park, I measured the trees, I spent some time there, and I analyzed basically the existing conditions. So those are two things we're going to just briefly cover so you kind of know why we're making some decisions sometimes that may not seem like, why are we just doing that? It's like, okay, well, they had to, or it's in the best interest of other living things. So in terms of the existing conditions, there are a number of things that actually impact the quality of the space, and we can kind of go through those. There's really the roadway noise, there's the limited number of entrances, beach erosion, water quality is obviously something that we discussed, and then the infrastructure and amenities. All right. So we've also analyzed basically the caliber of the tree and what the quality is of each of these trees. This is what we call a tree inventory. So as I said before, we kind of measured that and in essence are looking at what the age of these are, because that might impact what we want to do in the future. That tree is going to go into decline in 50 years, and we want to think about a plan now, because trees take a long time to get this big. These are beautiful trees, and we understand that. So looking at that condition, actually a number of them are in great shape, and they're oak trees. And what they say about oak trees is it takes 500 years for them to grow, 500 years for them to live, and 500 years for them to die. So we're pretty safe on a lot of these. But we do know that some of them are kind of going in weird directions. So we'll kind of figure out if that's something that we want to look at. So, you can see here, I'm kind of standing in front of that lower since that's where the legend is going to show up. But in essence, that's basically where these conditions are. And so we're seeing that predominantly, that's all in good shape. There's a little bit of area over here where there's some invasive species that like to live on fences and stuff, and that's just something we want to pay attention to. And then in terms of ground cover, basically what you have is grass, but within that grass, you have either areas that are getting a lot of erosion or high traffic areas, and then you have areas where moss is mixing in. So that's not atypical. Actually, grass isn't the kind of grass that we use for lawns, doesn't really like the kind of soil that lives here, right? So the pH is too high because this was once a forest, which means that soil is going to be either neutral or acidic, and grasses like things that are a little bit more basic. So that makes us think about questions like, is grass an appropriate zoning for everywhere. I mean, obviously it's good programmatically, but we want to think about whether or not that's what we want to have everywhere. And then we've also looked at the beach condition. Now the sand's pretty nice in a lot of areas, but what we are also seeing is that there's quite a bit of erosion. And then we see on the beach edge as well, which is a swash zone. That's normal, right? That's where the beach would normally be. In fact, that's the size of what the beach would normally be without human intervention. Because that's where all the erosion is taking place in the scale. It's not huge waves, it's these little guys. And so we do know that that's a programmatic surface though, and people want to be at the beach to go swimming and all of that. So we also want to respect that. So that's how we combine those two. Erosion is a lot of it's coming off the paved surfaces in the buildings, and this one's coming off of an overflow from that drain inlet there when you get a lot of rain. And then the hardscape quality, generally, it's going through its normal asphalt life cycle, but it's gonna start to go on its decline. Concrete, the same, it's kind of in the middle. And then the building quality, there's been, I think, a lot of work Jim has mentioned, and you guys probably know some of the work that had gone on before, kind of determined it may be, or more than likely, near the end of its life. And there's other areas of asphalt that the moss has decided to just generally take over next to the building. And then in terms of outfall, which again, Allison spoke to, we see some of that coming out of the outfall condition. Some of this is just generally what is gonna be close to the edge of the lake. But we know that, and again, is something that we wanna improve as a community. And it's not just the beach that's causing that issue, it's many, many things. And then we have one of the sadder playgrounds that I discovered in all of my travels. Obviously, we'll look to, if that's something that you guys want, we can look to upgrade that significantly. Right now, those aren't really things that they would let you build anymore. So, furnishings are a few benches. One of them's broken. A lot of the other ones are in basically not great shape, but you can still sit on some of them. In terms of regulatory conditions, this site is pretty complicated. We're in a resource area, which is the pond. We have another resource area, which is across the road, which is a wetland. Ironically, because of the amount of roadway and disturbance that has occurred next to the wetland doesn't really impact us, and it's not considered a resource for this site. But the pond is, and so there are different setbacks. One area that some of you may be aware of is that we have a very special sedge that lives here, and we need to make sure that we protect that. That's part of being in one of these regulatory zones, is that there are species that show up. Those are the species that were there, and they support the ecology of the lake. So that's one of the ground rules, right? We can't go in there and go, you know what, state, forget it. No, that's not what we can do. I can't do that. I'm a licensed landscape architect. We have to respect that. We have conversations about what we can and don't need to manage, and what we do need to manage. So that's part of the conversation that we'll continue to have. It does also mean inevitably that we're going to have several conversations with the regulatory bodies such as Conservation Commission and inevitably the state. The next setback we have is the 30-foot no alteration zone. What you might find peculiar about that is that a building is already in that spot. So, again, these are things that we're thinking about. The next setback is the 50-foot no build zone with a building in it. They didn't have these before. This isn't somebody's fault. Nobody did anything wrong. These rules were after this building is from the 30s, I think. Is that what we discovered now? So they did not have these rules prior. And then you have a 100-foot buffer, which is a very typical setback for a waterway or a wetland. And then in Framingham, you have a 125-foot buffer. And so, as you can see, if we go kind of by the rules, we're really limited to doing not very because this is pre-existing, and because we're going to actually improve the quality of what is there from an ecological standpoint, and that's kind of my job, but hopefully it's one of the things that you guys want to see as well, that we will be able to make some alterations, especially in, you know, up here in this area specifically. We're going to have a lot more clay than in some of the other areas. Not that we can't do anything in those other areas, but we just, there's certain ways we have to approach that, and calculations like stormwater and things like that as well. So, you know, it does actually mean we can intensify some of that area, and the fact that we didn't basically, you know, that interface is not the best as we discussed. You've got a fence, you've got limited entries, you've got road noise. That area is probably an area of improvement that we'd like to really think about. And then the last one, we have a FEMA flood zone, so that's federal. And that's the orange area, purple. And that area is something that, again, is more about building or filling. If we fill that area, it kicks in a whole series of rules as well. So, this is more of a mapping of what I talked before about, which is this site analysis that we do. So you can kind of see the road noise and the penetration thereof. And then we have the limited entries, so the 4 entries up here. And then we've also basically figured out, you know, what areas are cool and receiving a lot of shade. And this is due to aspects too. This isn't just because it has the trees. It's because of where it is directionally. Oh, here's the arrow, so north, right? So you're getting a lot of afternoon sun on this side. So I imagine if you're at the beach in the summertime, it is hot. Is that correct? All right, science works. All right. All right, and so then we also have, you can see these, this is the wind arrows, so where the predominant winds are coming. And so, you know, in the summer, you may be getting a lot of hot air coming onto the beach and not off of the lake. And those are things that we can start to think about too when we alter the quality of the site. One other thing is there is a bit of pond weed, a mix of goodies over here, duckweed, and I think probably a lot of subsurface emergence and things like that as well. And that is kind of right where all the sand is. So those are things that we would certainly want to think about. So that's the visual of what I talked about before. Are there any questions about any of this right now? I'll just pause briefly in case anyone.
I just think one other consideration, when we do these types of park designs, we always think about our neighbors. So the neighbors to the right and left of the park, you know, we want to make sure that we have a design that is, you know, fits in with the neighborhood as well. So
Yeah.
it's just another, not necessarily a setback or a constraint, but it's a consideration that we want to make sure that the neighbors are involved too.
No, that's correct.
I'll make a little comment just on the
Sure.
observation. You mentioned about road noise. It's just, it's obviously the road's right there. You got boats out on the other side that's just as noisy, so I mean, it's a beach, right? So I don't know, I don't know what can be done really about the road noise, but you can't, if you do something about the road noise, the people at the beach go listen to the boats, so it's just a point I'm making.
You gotta add something to your legend for boat police.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm not, I don't use the
There was
beach.
0
I'm just-
boats there
it
when
just
I
seems
was
kind of
there,
funny.
but it was,
It's a good
you
You
know,
know,
it
worried
wasn't
about
prime
road
boats.
noise, what about boat
Yeah,
noise?
that's a good point.
Yeah. No?
Question, what
Yes.
size is it in terms of acreage?
We're at 1.18 acres is what we discovered. All right, I'm gonna have Rob talk a little bit about facility requirements based on a couple of crosscuts that we've done initially. So I'll just tell you what this.
Sure. All right, so there are a range of different requirements that are going to impact the design of any facility here. So the intent is to keep this as a bathing beach, and so if it is a bathing beach, we need to provide specific facilities. So they're fairly limited. So assuming that we did some quick calculations and sort of going through the code, the total beach occupant load is about 54 people. But this would apply up to 250, which I imagine would be a very crowded day on that beach. So the total required plumbing facilities, there's only 2 accessible restrooms. A men's and a women's, or what we would recommend is just have 2 single occupancy family restrooms, or what we call gender neutral restrooms. And so anybody can use them. And then we need a toilet and sink in each and 1 mop sink. And that's it. Those are the only requirements. So we really, so it's, in a sense, there's a lot of opportunity here to envision what this building wants to be. Maybe what it wants to be is something very small and simple, and we let the site take over. We don't need to provide showers. You do have pools, but not at bathing beaches. Lifeguard facilities are not required. If there are going to be lifeguard staff there should be facilities for the lifeguards so they can take a break in the shade and have the break room. Storage is not required either, but it is, of course, recommended for if there's any beach facilities that need to be stored over winter or at the end of the day. So let's talk a little bit about accessibility. So bathing beaches, there are specific accessibility requirements. So the restrooms and other amenities do have to meet accessibility requirements. You have to provide a route to the bathroom facilities, and then it's also best practice, although not required, to provide hard surface access into the water to a depth of 2 or 2.5 feet. So what that means in practice is usually, it's not something that you're leaving in the ground. It's often a beach mat, like the one you can see here in the image. So it's something that's rolled out seasonally, put away in the winter and then off season when people aren't bathing, and it lasts a long time. And it can be pulled in if there's a hybrid event, things like that. But it's a pretty durable surface. It's easy to maintain. You can kind of shake out, clean it out. Boat launches and piers. Now, there's been a conversation around a kayak dock, a kayak launch in this area. So that doesn't quite tip the requirements for accessibility related to docks for marine facilities. That's kind of for bigger facilities. But that being said, again, best practices would dictate that you provide an accessible route between the land and any vessel in the water, in this case, a kayak, an accessible way to get your boat into the water, and that the dock itself would be level and have a protective barrier around the outside. Playgrounds, generally, they're required to be accessible. The fixtures and play features need to meet specific requirements, and you need to provide a route to each play area. That's just part of the design process, but it's something we'll be taking into account. Picnic areas, also you need to provide, again, that accessible route from the parking area, from pedestrian areas, along the access points from the street to the picnic areas. And then 5% of the tables have to be accessible. That just means that you have one end that's has cantilevers you can roll up to it if you need to. Splash pads. Splash pad features, if we were to incorporate something like that in this site, that would also need to be accessible. And best practices would dictate also providing an aquatic wheelchair, which might be a great thing to consider for the beach in general. And then also providing a sensory area. So a sensory area is kind of like a lower intensity zone where kids can be a bit more comfortable, or maybe have some sensory, the high sensitivity to noises and sounds.
All right, so Rob will be back shortly. Building precedents, but we also, one of the things that we do as designers is we look through our own catalogs, we look at our other projects, we look at and we see, okay, well, these are kind of things that might work here, or these are some good ideas to start out with. So we want to share those with you as a way for you guys to start to think about maybe how we approach some things, and as well as what we could kind of find inspiration in. This is a park that Bishop Land Design designed in Quincy, and it is, what we like about this aspect of the park is we created a lot of landforms. We had to do a lot of cut fill. This was all within a floodplain, so we had to manage a lot of fill that was already there. It used to flood splash pad in Kincaid, which is integrated stormwater management with how we drain that. So we created a whole ecological system here, which is fed by the water from the splash pad, and then it goes through all of these other ecosystems and eventually leaves the park clean, which is awesome. It also helps to irrigate all the plants. So we know that the splash pad is going to be used a lot, so we did a lot of calculations to figure out how much water would go in the basins and what kind of plant material would like that. We like seasonal vegetation. We like to see things in bloom all the time. What's really good there is that means that it's good for all of the living things like bees. You can't have just things bloom once and then think the bees are just going to come for one season. So if we have things that are blooming constantly, we kind of help out the pollinators, but people really like flowers too, so that's really win-win. And so that's another thing is seasonal vegetation. This project that I worked on, and this is out on the Cape in Dennis. And when we think about services other than beach, but like that have a nice quality, we think about boardwalks and ways to kind of get around the site. What's going to lead you out of there? If it's not long, what is the service going to be? How can you delineate what is a habitat that you're creating or a cool vegetated area versus what is somewhere that people can just walk back and forth on? And so we did that in Dennis, and this is actually a similar thing but saltwater. So that's salt marsh, that's protected habitat. And then we had an area that we created over here with landforms that is new habitat that we kind of created, but this delineates those two things. So people can run around over here, and over here we're like, don't go there. That's for other things. And so this idea of creating varied topography helps create varied habitat as well as varied program. This idea of creating a variety of landforms. Also integrating within the park and the style, the structures, so that they talk to the landscape and the landscape kind of talks to the structures. Again, this is Bass River, so using the same materials as the boardwalk, kind of created these different shade shelters. And then thinking about how we use different elements to create space. So this is what we call the fench structure here. And it creates a pocket that people can socialize in, but it also delineates the playground from the rest of the park. There's no one there right now, but we have tons of pictures. A lot of people playing there. But I think the idea is, you don't have to just have a chain link fence around your play area or your splash pad. You can have something that's really unique. And then around that space, this is all zero irrigation. And this pretty much looks like this, like it's still kicking. It's pretty well managed. It's not extremely difficult to manage, and that's called xeriscaping. So thinking about ways that we, as we did in Kincaid, as we do here, think about ways that these things can sustain themselves. They just need maintenance. They just need weeding. They don't need to be mowed like every week when in the middle of the summer. They don't need to have irrigation, pumping. There's a hybrid there in terms of, we'll work with everybody to figure out what the best way to deal with this is. We have actually done projects where we pump water from, and I don't have a picture of this one, but I could have, where we actually pump water from basically has too much nutrients in it, right? The Milwaukee River, in fact, and we actually pump that water back onto the site to help to polish the water that's in the river. So if that's something that if you need irrigation because of what you're trying to create, that may be something that we can do to actually pull nutrients out of the water and then back to the terrestrial environment. That project has very, very green lawn. All right, and then again, going back to that same idea, plants take up that extra nutrients. Usually it's nitrogen and phosphorus. I worked on this floating wetland. This is one of my students when I was at Northeastern as a professor. And that is a floating wetland, and we can actually kind of extend the visual horizon of what the park is, right? You're not going to go out there and play on this thing, but it creates habitat, which is really beneficial. And it also, again, takes up nutrients.
Sorry, guys.
need their arms.
Just look better.
All right, why don't you go up for the structures portion of this program?
Great. So this was a project that we completed in the city of San Francisco. I think the photo must have gotten zoomed in. What I wanted to talk about with this one is that as we're thinking about this project, and this is situated in Balboa Park neighborhood in San Francisco, and it's surrounded by this really dense, rich cultural fabric. And so we want to think about how this sits, not just within, how any building sits, not just within the park, but how the park and the building relate to the neighborhood that surrounds it. And that's a really important part of how we think about our design process. And so there's a lot of different ways that we can approach this. And this was a project where we took a very minimal approach. This is for Norwood. We looked at renovating an existing bathroom at the Balch Field area in Norwood, and some of the issues there were around security and vandalism. So one of our ideas was to take this building that had been sort of blighted and create a kind of beacon moment through use of color. And at the same time, we raised up the roof and added this big sculptural roof piece that would be very difficult to climb. So this project we're moving towards funding, but it's just to say there's lots of different ways that you can start envisioning how to address this particular building within. Here's another project that is just wrapping up this spring. This is the Buckham Pool in Buckham, Mass. For this one, it's a really different setting, different context, right? So in the case of the Waushakum Beach project, we have the pond, and it's an incredible visual natural resource. How does the building start to relate both within the landscape of the park, but also within the context of the water itself? We're always thinking about maintenance. We want to make sure that this building is easy to maintain. So what are materials that are going to be appropriate on this site? What's going to create a low maintenance, easy building? Accessibility is really key, right? How do you get to the building and around the building? And then how does it relate to the site? And how can we have, not just an equivalent experience, but a primary experience for users who are differently able? And then how can we envision this as more than just those two restrooms that are required? Can it become a multifunctional space? Does it have a presence that expands beyond its purpose just as a restroom? Covered areas potentially that integrate with maybe some picnic zones, things like that. The building has the capacity to engage in that way. And then on the other hand, we have this small building, right? Is this a chance for it to be something fun that expresses kind of a playful character of Framingham? Can we think of this as something that's maybe not so much of kind of a block functional building, or something that is really expressive? So I have a few ideas. Maybe it's something that really kind of melts into the landscape. This is a public bathroom in Austin, Texas. We can do something that's really kind of interesting and reflects the unique character of this site. Again, maybe it's something along these lines. This is in Vancouver. It's called Climate. Similar Climate. It's something that's fun. It's durable. This is actually a modular building built without site and then just dropped it on foundation. That's an interesting idea. So lots of fun ways that we can approach this. It's going to be an interesting project.
So, once kind of in closing, before we start talking about the fun stuff we're going to do and the food that you can eat here, which is apparently very, very Framingham in nature, is this idea of human ecology. So hopefully what you're understanding is that, what we're trying to do here is look at the human uses, right? Look at the things that you guys kind of want for this site, but also respect and integrate the ecological systems that are really, really important for the lake to function properly and for all the critters and all the other living things to efforts have started, thanks Liz, and there's a couple community groups have already worked really hard to get us to this point and have actually started to give input to the city, and we want to just say that we're all ears, so if you go and people can show up, like, let's just make sure that we can communicate. Everyone can grab one of my business cards. I'm happy to hear directly from you all. That's how we want to work and make an impact. That's really for everyone. So we appreciate those grassroots efforts. It's basically what got us here, and it's why we're listening to everybody. The first thing that I want you guys to do, or the fourth thing, or you don't have to do it in order, but we have a couple of community mapping exercises. Now the maps look the same. There'll be someone at each station, so if you're a little bit confused about this, we're happy to just keep on telling you what you need to do. But the first thing we want to do is this existing conditions mapping, and what we want to know is, like, how does it function now? Like, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and mostly the bad and the ugly, because those are the things we want to fix. But we also want to know what you find, like, even though this is small, it's something that I really like, or this is where the creepy people hang out, or any of that. Like, just tell us how because I can't be there all, for a year and take notes, which would be the right way to do it. So I depend on you guys to be the eyes and the ears and the noses of all of this. So when you're at that map, just start taking notes, use arrows, whatever you need to do to communicate to us what's kind of going on there. It could be like, I like to picnic over here. It could be like the water, or like we talked about the seaweed, like, ew, it's really icky over there. Whatever it is that you want to communicate, we have pens, you just draw right on the map and the location where that stuff's happening. And again, please give us as much info as you can. And then the next one, even though it looks the same, that map is about what you want in the future. And I'm not asking you to draft out anything. That's fantastic. You can if you want to, if you're really good at that, go ahead. But if you're like, oh, I think this might be cool here, or, we talked about a splash pad, we talked about a lot of things. There's gonna be stuff that you can choose from as well. So maybe you do this. If you don't have any idea about what you want, you can maybe do the other exercises first, and it might give you some ideas about what could go there. But if you have things that aren't on those other exercises, or other things that you just really, really want, that's what that map is for. Okay, so there's two mapping exercises. We have some postcards here. This is called Postcards from the Future. All right. So your future self, that's going to be you for a minute. Your future self is going to write a postcard about what's happening at Waushakum Beach Park, or whatever we're going to call it again. And you're going to tell us what you were doing, what kind of fun you were having. So for people that maybe a map isn't the best thing for you, and you're more of like, you're a great writer, whatever it is, this is another way for us to learn more about like how could you see that? How is it going to be improved? What kind of environment is it going to be? So we made these cards. This is what AI told us the future is going to be. So we want to hear from the people now, because AI has spoken on this subject. So those are cards up there. Please take a little bit of time to fill those out. The next thing are the two other basically matrix boards that you see over here. This is called the Wish List Olympics. All right. So we do this because it's really important to prioritize. Because if we just say, yep, you're going to be like, give us everything, we want all of this. And I'll be like, well, there's a space issue here. We can't have all of that. And the state's going to be upset that we take out the sedges and all this stuff. So we need to manage we need to prioritize, and we want you to do that too. So we're going to give you a bunch of options on two different boards. But you're going to basically give it a gold, which is worth 3 points, a silver, which is worth 2 points, and then a bronze, which is worth 1 point. All right, that helps us with math later on. You don't need to know the math behind it, but it helps us out. And so, in essence, there are 2 of those. One is going to be, and only use the number of stars for each. Don't use all of your golds on one. You gotta use half of your golds on one and half of your golds on the other. Otherwise it messes up the formula. All right, so the first board is really about program activities and typology. So you can pick a number of those, right? The thing you want most, that's gonna be gold, right? Thing you want the most, second most, still gonna be gold, because you get 3 golds for this board. You get three for the other. And but you still get silvers and you still get bronzes. So we'll be handing out stars to everybody. And then what do you want? So this is a little bit abstract, but this gives us a sense of the look and feel of things that you want. I could weight this and tell you all the ones that are really good for like low carbon materials, but I want to hear from you guys first, and then we can maybe have that conversation and look at it later. But obviously, some of these things are just about how we might treat surfaces. You know, again, what is the most important thing is what I'm asking you, not just like you still have a few options. All right, so even though this is abstract, something probably resonates with you with those images. So again, just start to rate what those are. Okay, so that's really what we have for you. So I think now let's just stretch out. The last exercise, which is more stealthy, is that we're here to listen to you guys, and we actually do our best to remember what you said. We usually write down what you talked to us about, and that's kind of the best way for us to just hear from you all. So as we're doing this, feel free to just have conversations, and we'll record those, and that will be part of the outreach as well. Okay, let's go to it.